What's up everybody, it's Brian, and in this video I will be walking you through the first generation iPad. Currently it is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025, and I was watching a brief video on the latest iPads and it had me thinking, when did the original iPad come out? I looked it up and it came out just about 15 years ago. I did have the original iPad several months after launch. According to my original YouTube channel, Gumball Tech, I got that in November of 2010. No matter how you look at it, it has been a while, and kind of by today's standards, this would probably be considered an antique, but I thought it would be fun to revisit the original iPad and kind of check it out and just use iOS 5.1.1 and see how it is compared to today's devices. And I'm going to start with the original setup process. I did actually pick this up today from Facebook Marketplace for 30 bucks. Not in the greatest condition, but the glass is not cracked. The overall body is okay. I mean, it's 15 years, so it's had quite a bit of use. But from what I can tell, it still works. It is charging very slowly. It's been plugged in for maybe 4.5 hours now, and it's up to 40%. So let's go through the setup process. Very clean and simple compared to today's setup processes where you are asked a million different questions. Again, this won't be a comprehensive, I wonder if I happen to have an old iPad backup in my iCloud storage on my Apple account, which for the record, I officially switched away from Apple products in 2016, I believe. So almost 10 years ago, but I still have an Apple ID that I have, and I'll have to dig up real quick. As you can see on the screen, it looks like I'm not going to be able to sign in at this time, so I will skip the iCloud backup step and start this as fresh. Let me go back and try it from this screen and see if it's any different. I imagine, there was a problem connecting to the server. Okay, so it looks like might be out of luck for now, so I will skip it and at least get to the home screen and start playing around there. And there we are. So it's a pretty straightforward setup process. It is interesting to see how simple everything kind of was back in the day. So this is running iOS 5.1.1, which is the latest available version of iOS that runs on the original iPad. And I'm not exactly close to the screen right now. I'm a couple feet back, but the viewing angles on this display still hold up pretty well. Let's go into some of these apps and see how the experience was back in the day. Of course, we had Newsstand, not necessarily an app in particular. Cannot connect to the iTunes store, so that's interesting. I'm not really sure how I will get stuff on here. Yes, I will jailbreak this. That's going to be in a later part of this video. Let's see if the web browser is any capable these days. Starting with something simple. One of the features that the iPad eventually got once this supported the app switcher, as we can see here, the multitasking gestures. To me, it's kind of misleading to call it multitasking since you can still only do one app at a time. But with gestures, you can go up to get to the app switcher. Then you have this media control section here. You can pinch to close the app. And you can also switch between apps like so. So kind of cool. The first gen iPad only had 256 gigs of RAM, so a lot of the apps that you would eventually switch to would need to reload itself. It's kind of crazy how much today's devices have, because here's my Galaxy Z Fold 6, and it has 12 gigs of RAM in this thing. Way more than the first generation iPad. But at least using it out of the box, iOS progressively got more bloated over the years, so it kind of slowed itself down after a while. I was surprised that it got the background wallpaper feature, because I know that for the iPhone 3G, you had to use a jailbreak mod to add the home screen wallpaper to the device, and just doing that did slow things down a little bit. Speaking of wallpapers, let's take a look at some of the default ones that came included. I always thought that the default sort of water droplets wallpaper was pretty nice. One thing I also noticed is that overall, the settings app is way simpler compared to what we have today across both iOS and Android. No camera on this device. That didn't come until the following iPad, the iPad 2 in 2011. I'll probably try and get one of those also to mess around with for a bit. So currently just going through some of the settings menus to see what things were like. Unfortunately, it still does not seem to be working, so at least signing into an Apple ID is out of the question, unfortunately, so definitely going to jailbreak shortly. The skeuomorphism of iOS is something I really kind of miss, because look at the calendar app. This looks like an actual physical book, and it's kind of cool. Apps today definitely aren't like they used to be. Reminders app looks kind of nice. Simple. The Maps app still works, which is interesting. Powered by Google. The map tiles are loading. Let's see if any of the features work. What do we have here? Yeah, the satellite view works. It's pulling relatively recent photos also. Traffic data doesn't seem to be working anymore, but that's all right. You can even print your map. And my printer is still detected here. The way to remove apps from the app switcher is to tap and hold until they jiggle, and then you can close each one out. Let's move on to the next app, which was YouTube. Let's see if that works. I don't think it will. Yep, cannot connect to YouTube, unfortunately. Let's try and go to the YouTube website in Safari. I doubt that's going to work either. Let's proceed anyway. Your browser is outdated. Ouch. So unless there's a jailbreak web browser that is more up to date, that's probably how web browsing is going to be on this thing. And who knows, this probably doesn't even have enough RAM to load most modern websites. Oops, the address app or the contacts app. Not the most efficient use of screen space. There's still the top and bottom. Game Center was something I actually thought was cool when it was introduced, but since we can't get signed in, there's nothing much we can do there. All the store apps are non-functional. We already went to Newsstand. Already checked out Safari, unfortunately. That's not going to be too useful. I wonder if I could open Copilot on this. Yeah, highly doubtful, but for science, let's try it anyway. Nope. Certificate issues. Mail. Let's see if I can sign into my Gmail account. Unfortunately, I'm also unable to get my Gmail account working. It seems like there are more security issues throughout the device that prevent us from signing into stuff. But I will say that as I was entering my username and password multiple times, I've always liked the keyboard on the iPads. The keys are nicely spaced and everything, even in my little bit of typing, was spot on accurate, which is kind of nice. Photos app, there's nothing there. Let's try and take a screenshot. Power button and home. There it is. Here we have our screenshot. 768 by 1024. Interesting. It's able to see the Roku, so I can still screen share probably. Not going to try that. We'll get rid of that forever. And then the music app, which has had a couple of redesigns over the years. We'll go to photos. There. Back to the music app. So that's pretty much all I'm able to test without jailbreaking this thing, since that's the only way I can get apps on here. Although if I did have IPA files that were backed up in, or downloaded in iTunes, then I could transfer them onto here, but I have none. So that's it for this first clip, and now I'm going to get this jailbroken and use it for a week or two, and then I'll be back in a couple seconds with my final thoughts. It is now 4 days later rather than 2 weeks later, It turns out that even with jailbreak tweaks, you can't get the App Store to work completely. There are tweaks where you can at least view some of the categories, like the top downloaded apps and those sorts of things, but I can't sign in, which doesn't really make this useful. And that's even with using various certificates that you can install to try and get that to work, but I just couldn't get it to work correctly. So I abandoned that idea and obviously jailbroke it. Here's Cydia. I did jailbreak using Absinthe. It was a very easy one-click untethered jailbreak on Windows, also available for other operating systems. But as soon as I opened up Cydia the other day for the first time, it definitely brought back a lot of memories. A ton of time was spent in Cydia across both iPad and iPhone to try and totally customize the device. For the sake of this video, I didn't really put on that much. If we go back, and of course it has to reopen, while it's doing that, the battery life on this particular iPad is actually really good. The standby battery life, even though I'm not really signed into anything, so there's basically nothing going on in the background, it's still really good for being such an old piece of hardware. I don't know if the previous owner replaced the battery at some point, but at least in my usage, it's been pretty good. But here's what I have installed so far. Pretty much the only thing that is here is Full Force, as well as Viteris, which is a way to get apps onto your device, it was really the only option that I had for this particular case, because again, the App Store didn't work and I don't have really old IPA files from iTunes from many years ago. So I had to resort to this to actually get stuff on here. This is everything that I've been playing around with lightly. I probably spent no more than a couple of minutes in each of these just to try them out and see how they were on the iPad. As I showed in my previous clip, Safari is essentially useless here because it just doesn't support the latest web standards, which the majority of websites seem to use. So I did install Opera Mini, which I remember using back in the day when I had only 2G service in my area. It definitely made loading websites a lot faster because it minifies the websites. So it strips out a lot of various visual elements to give you a much more simpler but faster loading website. Here's Amazon in Opera Mini. Really not that bad, but if we tried to go to that same website in Safari, it's getting farther than I thought. A lot of websites may start to load some graphics and whatnot, but that's about it. In this case, the scroll bars, oh, there we go. It's a little sluggish right now, so as long as you're using Opera Mini, the internet is a little bit more usable. And again, I didn't spend too much time in any of these apps. They all work, and they all work pretty well. Again, these were the versions of the apps that were last compatible with this device, so I would expect them to work correctly. That said, neither the Tap Tap games work, especially Tap Tap Revenge 4, because this has to connect to servers to do anything, as you'll see here now. There's this blank message that comes up. If I enter some random username, it says error, so it cannot, and in this case it just crashed. No matter what, it just doesn't work. Flight Control was a game I spent lots of time on, so I'll open that here just for a few seconds. It didn't take too long to load, and it is exactly, whoops, how I remember. I played this a ton on both my iPhone and iPad. So it was cool to see this, even though I'm not really into these sorts of games anymore. That is pretty much it with this video. I'm not going to be doing additional content on this device. If you want to see how these apps run on an iPad, there are plenty of videos that cover that already. If there are any comments, questions, or feedback about this or anything else, feel free to leave them down below in the comments area. But that's it with this video. I am planning on doing something similar with the iPad 2 next, which should be a little bit better because it runs up to iOS 9, and I think the App Store isn't as problematic there, so I should be able to actually do a little bit more with it compared to this. Again, that's it with the video, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one.